Alright, well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another webinar from Connecting Up, which is another one of our Introduction to Microsoft Office 365 webinar that we've been running a couple of times now since July. So my name is Christine Hullum, and with me today I have Ryan Jones, who will take you through the different features that is included in the Enterprise One plan for Office 365 that's eligible for not-for-profits. So he will go through all the features one by one, and please feel free to type in any question that you might have on your question box, and we will address them as we go along. Also, we are recording this webinar, so you will be able to get access to the recording afterwards as well, which I will email to all of you. So other than that, I think I might just hand over straight to Ryan, as he does have a fair bit to cover. Over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Christine.
Hang on.
And thanks, Christine. Everyone for joining us today.
This is an introduction to Office 365 for non-profits, and I want to make it really clear right from the outset that this webinar is about helping you to understand what Office 365 can do for your non-profit, some of the different features, some of the different aspects of the offer Microsoft are making to non-profits. So if at any point that you've got a question, please post it in the question box like Christine mentioned before, and we'll go through questions basically every slide as soon as they come up, and we'll stay on the webinar as long as it takes to answer everyone's questions and make sure everyone understands Office 365 and goes away with a good understanding of the next steps involved. So the first thing I want to just clear up is what we're talking about when we talk about Office 365. Now, we are not talking about the home version of Office 365, which is the kind that you can buy from retail stores like JB Hi-Fi or Harvey Norman. That version comes in a box and allows you to install what is essentially Office 2013 on on a limited number of computers. What we're talking about today is the enterprise version of Office 365, which Microsoft are donating to not-for-profit organisations all over the world. Now, I'll go into a bit of the difference around what the enterprise version of Office 365 is shortly, but just to start off with, I want to go a quick refresher on what some of the benefits of cloud software are. So I guess the first thing that we need to talk about here is the flexibility. Now, so often I get emails from organisations that they can't add extra users to their server because it can't handle the capacity, or one more user and they'll need to replace their entire server. Cloud software is giving you the capacity to add users as you need and scale your organisation up and down as appropriate without big hardware investment. So a lot lower total cost of ownership, and fortunately in this case very little cost associated with it, which is exactly what we all need. Now, the reliability involved in cloud software is really a good peace of mind helper. Cloud software is generally hosted in large data centers with guaranteed service agreements, multiple data centers in different locations, and automated backups, which means that your servers stay up more often, and if something does happen, you've always got backups that you can go back to, which is, again, another really useful aspect that is a pain point for a lot of organizations, particularly small organizations that might be hosting email servers internally. And the other thing is that it's always up to date. So particularly in the case of Office 365, Microsoft keep the software always up to date. All users always stay on the same version, so you don't have to worry about emailing that file over to your colleague and your colleague being unable to open it. You know that everything within Office 365, all of the users in your organization are on the same version, and you can quite easily communicate with each other. And of course all of that just equals increased peace of mind over some of the more traditional aspects of computing with a computer on every desk and a server in the organization. So with that said, what is Office 365? Well, the enterprise version of Office 365 is essentially Office in the cloud. You get all of your favorite Microsoft Office tools, so web-based versions of Word, Excel, PowerPoint and OneNote. You can work collaboratively on documents that were created in those programs, so you can quite easily share files, work on files at the same time. You can pick up where you left off on different devices. So if you're pushing a deadline, you leave your desktop computer in the office, you jump on the train. I catch the train to work, so I'm going to use the train as an example. I pull out my tablet and I can pick up where I left off on a document and continue editing along while I'm on the train. And there's also mobile apps that will enable you to edit your documents wherever you are. And you get to leverage the power of Microsoft Cloud servers. So that server that you've got in the office that might host your Exchange email, or it might host SharePoint, might host a range of different things. Some of those jobs can now be outsourced to Office 365, and in some cases organizations won't need an on-premise server anymore, which anybody who's bought a server will know just how big a saving that is. Now with the servers, that includes Microsoft Exchange for hosted email and shared calendars in the cloud. That includes SharePoint for a public-facing website or a private document repository. It includes Microsoft OneDrive for Business, which gives you an enormous amount of cloud storage. And Microsoft Lync, which enables you to make voice and high-definition video calls as well as instant messaging. I like to tell people that it's kind of like a private organization-based version of Skype with a few more bells and whistles, which I'll go through in a sec.
Thanks, Ryan. Just a couple of questions here, which I believe you will elaborate further in the next few slides anyway. But first question from Rachel about, do you need extra software to work collaboratively on documents?
No. There's two different ways of doing the collaborative work on documents. One of those is using Microsoft Office Online. So using Office Online, you can go to OneDrive, you can open the file that you want to edit, and you can edit it on your internet browser, and you can quite happily work on that document with a colleague working on the document at the same time. You can all use the web browser version, that's no problems. The other way of doing it is when you go to open that document, you can open it in Office 2013, the desktop version instead. And what it does is when you work collaboratively, you can, it'll lock out the paragraph that you're working on so that your colleague can't overwrite what you're doing at the same time. So that just prevents any conflicts that we see so often. It just means that you know who's working on it, you can see who's working on it, and you can refresh the document when you need to. So you don't need additional software for that, but if you are already using Office 2013, then you can use Office 2013 to give you a few more additional features.
A good
example that we usually use with that I haven't actually mentioned so far is grant writing proposals. Now I'm sure everyone on the webinar always has their grant proposals done way in advance, and they're all over the deadlines, but there are some organisations that sometimes have to push those deadlines right to the limit to get everything done, and they need to get all hands on deck to get that done in time. And what some organisations do is they cut up their proposal into paragraphs, sections, pages, email it out to different people responsible, get them all to make their changes, and then email it back to a central person that puts it all together. Now with Office 365, you could all work on the same document at the same time, knowing who's working on what paragraph and where. If you're on the web version, you can see exactly where your colleagues' cursors are. If you're on the desktop version, you can see exactly which paragraphs your colleagues have locked out at the moment. So the way Microsoft has done that is very clever to prevent these conflicts, and you can always refresh it to see what your colleagues have written, whether you need to make any changes based on yours. But it means that that big job at the end, well, the big job at the start of cutting up the document and the big job at the end of collating the document are now made a lot easier, because you can all go in, you can all make your edits at the same time, and then at the end you can just give it a once-over and it's ready to go. That's the big, really helpful example we usually talk about in terms of the collaborative document editing.
Thanks, Ryan. Another question from Deb, which is to do with internet access. But for example, you are on the train or somewhere without internet access. Do you actually really need that to edit your files, or can you do that offline?
Deb, it really depends on the device that you're using. So there is a feature, I'll go into OneDrive in a bit more detail shortly, but there is a feature with OneDrive. So if your file is stored on OneDrive, which would be probably the ideal way of using Office 365, you can sync the OneDrive folder down to your laptop, and you can work on the documents on the train and then sync it back up when you get home. But, you know, it's really useful. I was in New Zealand in May doing some presentations on Office 365 with a colleague from Info Exchange, and Marcus had stored all of the information that he needed on his laptop before he left the office, so that he could work on the plane on the way over and in New Zealand when he didn't have internet access, and without having to really worry about it. Obviously, if you're doing that, it probably depends on how collaboratively you're working with your colleagues on those files. You probably want to make sure that they're not working on them at the same time if you're going to be completely offline and you're not getting those live updates. But for example, if I'm on the train, I can tether my tablet to my phone and create a wireless network that way and stay online. So yeah, I will go into OneDrive in a bit more detail, and if you need any more help with that at the time, then we can go through that, no problems at all. So I guess the question a lot of people ask is, okay, well, you know, I've got Office 2013, it works really good, why do I want Microsoft Office in the cloud? What benefit is there? Well, I guess the main thing here is that you can access your data whenever you want to. You know, I've just talked about the example of leaving your office, having your files in the cloud, getting on the train and editing your documents. Well, you can do that. If you happen to be in another country and you don't have internet access or a computer, you can go to a internet cafe, you can log into your Office 365 portal, and you can see all your files and you can make your edits. You can have centralized document storage for your organization using OneDrive, which means that you not only have access to your files, but you might have access to files from other teams, or you might have access to files from colleagues. And there are a stringent set of security protocols in place with Office 365, so you can limit access to documents as you need, but you have access to documents that you need while you're on the road, which is really useful. You have automated backups of everything associated with Office 365, whether that be your OneDrive files or your email, and you don't need to run your own servers. Now, when I say you don't need to run your own servers, there will always be some organizations that have an exemption from that and they still need to run a server for some reason. But Microsoft have done a really good job of making it so that a big one that a lot of organizations do is retain Active Directory within their organization. You can still do that. You don't need to run everything in the cloud if you don't want to, but the option's there for you. So for me, if it was a small organization, in particular, a lot of small organizations could jump onto Office 365, could get access to server infrastructure they never would have been able to afford previously, because they just can't afford to implement and run the servers, or they don't have the technical know-how, and it'll all just run a lot smoother for them. It's a really good way of doing it. So it's a bit of an idea of why you would do Office in the cloud. It's a bit simplified, but I think we'll go over some of particularly the server technologies now and go through some of the ways that you can use those and see whether it gives you another idea of what you can do with Office 365 and why you would want Office in the cloud. So the first thing, which is I like to think of as a bit of the foundation of Office 365, is Microsoft Exchange Online. So a lot of you are probably already using Exchange for emails. So this is powerful web-based email, but in the same way that it's powerful web-based email, you can use Outlook to connect to the Exchange server and you can access your emails on your computer just like you would now. You can also access them on your mobile phones, your tablets, things like that. Android, iOS and Windows Mobile all have really good Exchange support built in. So no matter what kind of smartphone you've got, you'll be able to access the email while you're away if you want. Exchange, if you're not already using Exchange, Exchange also has really powerful shared calendars. And these can be used from anything from seeing when your colleagues are in meetings and making it easier to plan meetings, to managing your meeting rooms, and managing assets. I've spoken to organisations that even use Exchange for managing carpool cars, data projectors, laptops, whatever it might be, so that it allows you to book them out for your colleagues and know who's got what and when. Microsoft give you 50 gigabytes per user of storage for Exchange Online. I remember when I was at uni it was 10 megabytes per user. So 50 gigabytes is a lot, and that's only been increased in the past couple of years. No doubt it'll increase again in the future. Like I said, you get access via the mobile apps and it's all secure and private. So you can log into the website while you're on the road or you can access it from your devices. And the other thing that I should mention that a couple of people have asked is you can use your current domain for your Exchange email and you can migrate your email over from your current platform.
A few questions here, Ryan, about Exchange. Firstly, from Andrew, we currently use Gmail and Google Calendar. What benefit is gained in using Exchange?
I think the best way of demonstrating that is I'll go through the next slides, because when you start to see how Exchange interacts with the other tools in Office 365, you start to get a better idea for what the benefit for Exchange would be in that case.
Another question from Deb, how can I import my iCloud calendar and Outlook into Exchange?
So I take it your Outlook calendar isn't on Exchange now. There are various tools to do that. Going from iCloud to Exchange is a bit different. What I'd probably do with that, that's probably a bit outside the scope of this webinar. So if you can send me an email after the webinar, we'll go through that and we'll get back to you. Christine will send my email address out at the end of the webinar.
So just to clarify, Deb is not currently using Exchange. They're using Outlook for email and iCloud Calendar. Just the next question about migration from Ken. Could we migrate part of an organization to Office 365? For example, some users stay on in-house Exchange and some perhaps subdomain on Office 365?
That's really a question for your implementation partner. There are ways that you can do that, and when I go through the difference in the plans at the end of the webinar, we have had examples of organisations that have half their staff on one plan and half their staff on another. I suspect you can keep half your staff on an internal server and half external, but it would be down to your specific implementation partner and how they set that up as to how useful that's going to be for you. Alright, so it's great, you've got email, perfect, nothing particularly amazing about having email in a web browser these days. except that you get the power of the shared calendars and you don't have to host it yourself anymore. But now we're talking about Office 365 has access to your email, has access to your calendars, and has access to your organizational address book. So then we get into Lync Online. So Lync Online takes your Outlook calendar information to get a put real-time presence information in to show whether you're available at the time or not. So what that actually means is that you can see in the little picture I've got there, the bloke on the left-hand side there has a little red bar next to his photo. And what that means, we'll call him Brian. What that means is Brian isn't available at the moment. So Lync knows, looking at Brian's calendar, that Brian is currently in a meeting. So I know that I can't talk to Brian because Lync is telling me that he's not available. You know, and that could also be that Brian's in a call, but it takes that information about the calendar and turns it into something usable, so that I know that if Brian's not in the office, I know that if he's working from home or he teleworks, I know that he's not available. The guy in the middle there, he has a green bar next to his picture, which tells me that he's online. So I could go on there and I can talk to him and not have any problems at all. The third one in that line there, Bonnie. Bonnie has a yellow bar next to her photo. And what that yellow bar is telling me is Lync's saying, okay, I've looked in Bonnie's calendar. Exchange is telling me Bonnie doesn't have a meeting at the moment, but she hasn't touched her computer in a while. She hasn't touched her computer in over 15 minutes. So she hasn't got a meeting, but we think she might have stepped out for a minute. So I know that when I try to talk to Bonnie, she's probably not around. So that level of information is particularly useful when you have colleagues at telework, or particularly useful when you have colleagues that travel, so that you get a better idea of who you can talk to, when you can talk to, and gives you a deep connection. And that's an example of what you can start to do when you've got Exchange connected to Lync, connected to Office 365. Now, of course, Lync Online, you can do instant messaging. Looks like the photo there. Hopefully people are pretty familiar with Skype and other instant messaging tools like that. You can do voice chat, you can do high definition video chat. You can do group chats with up to 5 people. There's mobile apps for Windows Phone, Android and iOS. One of the really cool things that a lot of people don't know is you can allow external people to meet with you, to join your phone call, and that can be via the Lync web app, or there's also an option to allow people to dial into a phone number. So if you have colleagues or even clients who are in remote areas, don't have very good internet access, they can call a local number and they can join your phone call, which expands the power of Lync astronomically when you can start to get other people involved and you do have that more offline option. Now, a really powerful feature of Lync that isn't available on Skype is the screen sharing tools. So Skype does basic screen sharing, but in Lync you can request control of the computer, and the great part about when you request control of the computer, you can give control just to a certain window or a certain application that you've got open. So a perfect example might be, I have a colleague here in the office, her name is Tina. Tina is particularly good at Microsoft Excel formulas, and so if I need a bit of help from Tina on my Excel formulas, and I can look at Lync and I can see if Tina's online, and if Tina's got a green bar next to her name, I can quickly send her an instant message and go, hey Tina, can you quickly help me with something? Hopefully she says, sure Ryan, no problems. I can turn on the screen share and I can say, Tina, can you tell me how to fix this formula? And Tina goes, oh, it'll just be easier for me to just do it for you. Can I get control? I can just give Tina access to Excel, which means she can't go through any private files on the computer. She can make the change to Excel, and then I can revoke her access at any time. So secure, private, but still gives you that functionality to work collaboratively together, whether you're working from home or whether you're working in the same office. Very, very cool stuff.
Can you turn it off so no one knows where you are?
Yes.
Yes. One thing I haven't mentioned so far is you actually don't have to use every feature in Office 365. It's not a all-in or none-in scenario. We have organisations that register for Office 365 and only use Exchange. We have organisations that register and they might only use SharePoint or Lync. You don't have to use everything. If your organisation rolls out Lync across the organisation, then there'll be privacy settings there that you can set up to try and turn that off.
A question regarding accessibility from Roland. Can the colors for availability in Lync be customized because they're a bit hard for those, for example, who are colorblind?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I would imagine that there would be an option in the accessibility options to do that. We'll have to have a look into that and get back to you. I'm sorry.
That was a good question, by the way, Roland. And another question from Rachel. Does your Office 365 account trigger an automatic login into Office Online and Lync, etc.? What is the starting point for an employee to connect into all these services easily?
So the starting point for an employee would be for an administrator to set them up an account, and you can set up the account and issue them a username and password, and then they log into the Office 365 portal, and in the Office 365 portal they're instantly given an interface that shows email, OneDrive, SharePoint, everything in one place. You can access your Yammer. I haven't spoken much about Yammer yet, but Yammer's like Facebook, Twitter hybrid for your organisation. You can set it up so that the first thing they see is your SharePoint intranet, which shows what's going on in your organisation this week. Maybe you've got it set up to show a funny picture every week or something like that. So it's very flexible and down to how you implement it. So that's Lync. Now we go over to OneDrive for Business, which used to be called SkyDrive Pro, if you remember that. So OneDrive for Business now gives you 1 terabyte of cloud storage per user. It used to be 25 gig. Microsoft have increased it this year to 1 terabyte. Now, a colleague tells me, who's usually right about these kind of things, the average Word document is now 250 kilobytes, which means that 1 terabyte of storage per user is 4.3 million Word docs. So it's a lot of space. And the way Microsoft have leveraged OneDrive as part of Office 365 is really useful in terms of, especially when you're not working in the office. So you can access your files from anywhere, but like we were talking about before, you can sync them down to your computer and go offline and make the edits that you need to do offline, and then sync them back up when you get back to an internet connection. You have that flexibility. You get document versioning, which is really useful if you accidentally muck something up or an issue comes up where you need to roll back a file. You can go into OneDrive for Business and there's an option to see the versions of a file. You can see who created each version, and you can roll back to the appropriate date or the appropriate user to get that file back to where it was from. Now, OneDrive for Business is really cool because you can go to the folder that you need to access and you can create a new Office document in that folder straight from a web browser, and you can edit it straight away in Office Online. So you don't have to worry about downloading the file, you don't have to worry about syncing files, uploading files. It's just in the web browser and it's very easy to use. So that's very convenient if you're not on your Office computer, if you don't have the file synced with your desktop. It's also really, really convenient, I've found, when you're not working on your own computer. If I need to log in on somebody else's computer and do a real quick edit to a document, I can do that, and I can do that without downloading the file. I can do that in a web browser. I go to my OneDrive, I navigate for the file, I can click on it and open it straight away in Word Online. And Word Online now has, it must be 90 or 95% of the functionality of the desktop version of Office. So unless you're a power user, you can make those quick edits and you can get back to work knowing that that file has been synced automatically with your colleagues in the office who are probably the ones needing it. But again, the way that this syncs together is you can also click on the file and very easily email it over to a colleague. So this is again where you start to leverage Exchange and your calendars in addition to OneDrive, in addition to the ability to use Office Online to create a scenario where you can edit everything, particularly when you're on the road, but you don't have to. You can also edit that file in Office 2013 and Microsoft will automatically sync the file for you. It's really, really powerful stuff.
So a few questions regarding OneDrive. When you talked about document versioning, does that include automatic archiving?
I believe so. I need to double check. There are also various options around how you implement that. So again, it's very flexible, but you need to make sure that your implementation partner sets that up the way you need it set up.
And the next question from Ray, does OneDrive or Office 365 replace SharePoint for document control?
Yes and no. So SharePoint is my next slide, and they work together really. So your SharePoint still has a file repository, your SharePoint sites still have file repositories, but they link over to a OneDrive. And one thing I didn't mention that nobody's asked, which is odd. Usually I get asked a question about storing other files on OneDrive. You don't have to store Office files on OneDrive. You can store Photoshop files, video files, whatever you need, knowing that you've got that cloud storage and it can sync. But the one thing that you can't do is edit files in Office Online that can't be edited in Office. So if you choose to sync a Photoshop document, because Photoshop's not part of Office, you can't make the edits to that document on the road. You need to sync that file back down and edit it in Photoshop. But it's a really good way of getting backup of those files and also being able to sync them with a central document repository so that your colleagues can edit them. So SharePoint. SharePoint, if you haven't used SharePoint before, is almost whatever you want it to be. It is a system of online work sites for collaboration is the short version. But what that actually looks like is it could look like a public website for your organization. It could look like a private website for everybody in your organization, sort of like a notice board where you have your timesheets and your HR documentation and various forms that are needed in the day-to-day running of your organization. It could be project sites. So a really popular way of using SharePoint is to set one up for each program, each project that you're running. The project might have a site email address so that everybody involved in that project can access the emails relevant to that project. You can share documents related to the project, and again they sync with OneDrive and they're editable in Office Online straight out of the web browser. You can use SharePoint Online to track tasks and timelines, which is one of the great reasons why you would use it for projects. And there's also an amazing array of things that you can do with SharePoint through custom applications, building things on top of it that allow you to do a lot with it. I guess the thing with SharePoint is because you can do so much with it, the best thing to do is get it set up. If it's going to add value for your organization, do a basic setup, see how you go with it, and then once you've treaded water in it for a bit, then you can work out what you need to do, what gaps there are, what added functionality you need, and move forward from there.
So a quick question, just this came in after the OneDrive bit, but I might just ask it now. From Mark, would it be easy to archive previous used documents such that it doesn't use up so much of the 1 terabyte, or would you need to transfer it to an external HDD?
The best way would probably, I'd be tempted to zip the file, but if you were going to do that, I suspect you probably have to download it to the desktop, zip it on the desktop, and then upload it again. There'd be a few different ways of doing that, but you could do that.
This question from Andrew, can you do everything or all of the above with SharePoint, for example, both public website and private organization site at the same time?
Do you
mean can you have them running at the same time? Yeah, you can. I haven't seen a limit in the number of work sites that you can set up for SharePoint. You can choose to use the public website if you want. You don't have to use the public website. A lot of the organisations that I see that do use the public website are either already using SharePoint or SharePoint for websites, SharePoint for internet sites for their website, or they're organisations that their website was incredibly tired and needed an update, so they chose to convert it to SharePoint Online when they migrated to Office 365. Or, and again, this is the really cool thing for me about Office 365, it enables organisations that didn't have websites or didn't have websites that had content management systems to now relatively easily set up a public website using SharePoint Online. There's a lot of organisations that have done it themselves, and you know, it's functionality that they struggled with in the past, so it's really good that they're now able to get that functionality.
So what tools are available for developing websites on SharePoint?
There's a lot of tools in the administration section of Office 365, and there's a lot of point and click tools, a lot of built-in templates, a lot of things you can do without having to resort to typical developer tools. Microsoft have a great array of documentation and various tools on SharePoint Online. So they have heaps of resources and heaps of examples. There's also ways that you can take previously developed custom SharePoint apps and implement them in your own SharePoint site. So quite literally, it's very flexible, and there's so many tools. I'm sure you could use something like Visual Studio or something like that, one of the Microsoft developer tools to do it. But again, you're not restricted, and if you're not a developer, there's a lot you can do without leaving the web browser.
Sticking to the discussion about websites, can you use then multiple domain names?
That I don't know. I'd need to check that for you. Most of the time people are only wanting to use the one organisation email. I'm sure there would be a way of setting up multiple domains. I take it you're wanting multiple public websites, so I'm sure there'd be a way. It'd just be a matter of finding out exactly how the best way to do that is.
So question from Stuart back onto OneDrive. If you're editing a OneDrive document, is it accessible to other users at the same time?
Depends on the document, and it depends on how you're editing it. So I'll clarify that a bit more. If you are editing, say, an Office Online document, so it might be Word, might be Excel, might be PowerPoint, or it might be a OneDrive note. If you're editing that in the online version, your colleagues aren't locked out of it. If they go into editor in their Office Online. They'll be able to see where your cursor is, so they'll be able to see as you type what you're typing, and they'll be able to steer clear of what you're doing. If you choose to open that file in Office 2013, they won't be locked out of the file, but they will be locked out of the paragraph that you're currently using. So that way they're prevented from making changes that might conflict with you, and you're prevented from accessing paragraphs that they're currently working in. So no, your colleagues won't be locked out of the file. They'll be able to work on it at the same time, but exactly how that looks does differ slightly depending on whether you're using Office Online to edit that document or whether you're using Office 2013. Alright, so what Microsoft are doing is they are donating Office 365 Enterprise E1 for charities. So that's the particular plan that they're offering to Australian non-profits, New Zealand non-profits, and non-profits through Southeast Asia. So the E1 plan is a pure donation. You register on the Microsoft website, which is a link that we'll give you at the end and in the email that follows this webinar. And when you register, you will register for a trial of the E3 plan, which I'll show you the difference in just a sec. And you get a 30-day trial of the E3 plan. And in that 30 days, what you need to do is you need to request that your organisation is verified as a non-profit. And so that's when Microsoft come back to us and say, hey, Connecting Up, is this organisation actually non-profit? They verify with us, and then away you go. So at the end of your trial, you then have the choice of using the donated E1 plan. So there's zero cost per user for the E1 plan, or whether you choose to use the E3 plan, which is heavily discounted for non-profits. So the E1 plan itself includes Office Online, which we've spoken about in a bit of depth. It includes the Exchange Online hosted email server. It gives you OneDrive for Business with that 1 terabyte of storage per user. You get access to Lync. You get access to SharePoint Online. You can do Active Directory integration with E1. You get Yammer Enterprise, which, as I mentioned before, is kind of like a Facebook, Twitter hybrid. I'm sure there's a few of you on the webinar right now thinking that's great, but why would I want to use that? It's really, really useful for quick feedback, short conversations, and also fun things that can help your culture and help bonding in your organisation. It's a whole range of different ways that you can use it, and most of the organisations that are using it swear by it. And the other thing that you can do is 24/7 technical phone support. So Microsoft will give you the support with the E1 that you need to get it underway. So all of that is free. Now with the E3 for charities, what you get on top of the E1 plan is access to the desktop apps. So the E1 plan doesn't actually include Office 2013. So the desktop apps come with E3, so do the mobile apps, so Word, Excel and PowerPoint for mobile phones, tablets, things like that. You get some advanced email features and some advanced archiving features around email. You get access to an e-discovery center. You get access to some advanced voice features in Lync, which can even be used to replace your physical phone line. And you get access to some business intelligence tools. Now, most of the organisations we speak to are quite happy with the E1 plan, but what you can do if you only need the E1 plan and you need the desktop tools, is you can request a donation of the desktop applications through our donations program, and that will work with Office 365. So obviously to get access to some of the tools you would need the professional version, but Office 2013, if you've already got Office 2013, you can keep using the copy that you've got. If you haven't got Office 2013 yet, you can request a donation, or you may have Office 2010 that you requested in the last 2 years, in which case you can go onto the Volume License Centre and you can get an upgrade through software assurance. But most organisations, the E1 plan is sufficient, and you can get that donation of the desktop license through us. The E3 plan is discounted, and it's around about $5.50 US per user per month. So there is a cost associated with it. It's heavily discounted from the retail pricing, but again, in a lot of cases we find that the advanced functionality here is something that non-profits don't need, and you can get by on the E1 plan and the desktop client. So that's great. You want to have a look at it. How do you get it? So you can go to microsoft.com/Office365 nonprofits. If you have seen enough today that you're really considering Office 365, I do encourage you to go to that website and sign up, because you will get that 30-day trial. So you can get the trial up and running. You can start to have a play around with how it is set up. You can do all of that without migrating your information. You just have a blank server there to play with, especially if you're a bit techie and you want to have a look at how it works. And you can work out what you do from there and whether it is a good fit for your organisation. You know, there's no cost to that at all. So I highly recommend you give that a go, but we will email that link out to you at the end of this webinar. I guess the last thing from me before we get into the last questions is a lot of people sort of ask whether they're ready for Office 365, what they need to get ready for Office 365. So we've worked with our friends at InfoExchange to develop an Office 365 readiness assessment that provides you with a series of recommendations basically based on your current IT platform. We give you a report on your technical readiness for Office 365. We give you a report on the key steps for migrating your organisation to Office 365. You get a detailed quote for InfoExchange to perform the migration on your behalf, and also future steps that you could take to get more benefit from Office 365. So that might mean that we do the readiness assessment. You're not currently using SharePoint, but InfoExchange have a look at your report and your current assessment and go, you know what, you could really save a lot of time if you use SharePoint. So maybe once you've got Office 365 down the track, this is something that you could implement to really help your organisation. Or it might be something like Lync. So there's a range of different things, and I guess hopefully I've given some pretty vague answers today, but hopefully some of those answers people understand. They're vague because there's a million ways of being able to do it to suit a million different types of organisations. And so this kind of Office 365 readiness assessment provides you with personal recommendations based on your current situation. So it means that we can better assess exactly what the right way of doing it is for your organisation.
Great. We do have a couple of final questions here from a range of different people. Firstly, talking about OneDrive again, how does OneDrive go with synchronizing changes when the same file has been modified both online and offline?
If you're live editing the file, the way that Microsoft block out the paragraphs basically prevents that issue from occurring. The only time that it can occur is if you sync it with your, say you synced it with your laptop and then you jumped on a plane, edited the file. When you get to your destination, you found that your colleague has made edits to the same file, and then you can get a conflict. It's all addressed pretty easily. You know, it's a common situation, so you just get warned and you can sort it out at the time, depending on what's the most appropriate course of action.
A question from Katie on Exchange. I have heard that the management console for Exchange Online is a cut-down version of the on-site Exchange management console. Do you know the key differences between the two, particularly what I will not be able to do if I switch to Exchange Online?
That depends on whether you switch to the E1 or the E3 plan, because there are functional differences between the versions. So the E3 plan comes with that advanced archiving I was talking about and some other advanced email features. So what I'd probably consider doing in your case is registering for the trial and having a look at the interface that you get and having a look at the options you get through E3. And then you can also have a look at, once you've validated your organisation, you can have a look at the options through E1. And I guess see whether the options you're getting under E3 are what you need to do what you need to do, or whether there's something that needs to be customised for your organisation.
Speaking of E3 and 3.1, Andrew has spent some time with both of them, and it seems that for their users, it is simple to get up and running with the regular Office programs, but the admin just looks complicated. We don't have a proper admin person. What options are there for getting set up to begin with?
If you need
assistance with the migration, outside of the Office 365 readiness assessment, an IT provider like InfoExchange can assist you in getting it set up for your organisation. And depending on how complicated your setup is, will depend on the cost to your organisation. What I usually find is the most complicated part of getting set up with Office 365 is the migration. And it basically depends on what you're coming from and what you're going to. So if your organisation is on, say, an older version of Small Business Server, an older version of Exchange, and you want to upgrade and migrate across to Office 365, you're probably going to need a bit of help with that. But I've spoken with some organisations that are using, say, a shared Yahoo account for their organisation, and once we go through what they use the Yahoo account for, well, most of the emails that are in the Yahoo account are processed, and what that organisation could do is just set up Office 365 fresh and get up and running. You know, it's really tricky because it's so dependent on what's important to each organisation and what the best way is for that organisation. But in general, to do a basic setup, it's pretty easy with the admin console in 365. If you do need a bit of help, get an IT provider in to do it for you, particularly with the migration. The migration is so important, especially if you're already on something like an existing Windows server.
You mentioned before about editing on Word and paragraphs to identify it's been edited by someone else, but what about shared editing of spreadsheets because there are no paragraphs to look up?
Blocks out cells in that case.
Thanks, Ryan. A couple of final questions here. First from Charities, what are the business intelligence tools?
I don't have that information. We would need to find that out for you. I've been doing this webinar now for 5 months, and that's the first time I've been asked that question. In most cases, organisations just simply don't use them.
Questions from Philip. What are the advanced email features, and do you have to upgrade to 2013 or can it integrate with 2010?
They're primarily based around how your mailboxes are archived, and there is a lot of things that people would have done with Exchange Enterprise. Mostly around the archiving. There's a couple of other things that may crop up. I guess the good thing with Exchange is it's pretty standard in terms of Exchange support. So there's nothing stopping you from using Office 365's implementation of Exchange with Office 2010. Office 2013 might give you a couple more bells and whistles, but the main improvements in Office 2013 over Office 2010 are the document syncing and the ability to lock out those paragraphs and those cells and work a bit more collaboratively. Certainly if you're on Office 2010 though, it doesn't preclude you from using Office 365 at all.
Great. A quick question from Keith. What is the minimum acceptable upload or download ADSL speed?
That depends entirely on how many users you've got and what features of Office 365 you use. So that is something that InfoExchange will look at as part of the readiness assessment. They'll assess your users, they'll assess how your users are using Office 365, and then they'll be able to provide you with a report on exactly what speed connection your organisation needs. Obviously, the more users you've got, the better an internet connection you're going to need.
Leah has been advised to use 365 for emails only as access to files will be too slow. Is this an ex-Sydney issue only?
Is it a Sydney issue only? No, I mean if you're on a, back to the previous question, if you've got a lot of users trying to access that at the same time, you've got a lot of document syncing going on, then in some cases, yeah, the file syncing will be slower, I guess. It'll depend entirely on the speed of the internet connection you've got. Using Office 365 for email is a great first step, and as time goes on and as you see value in the other features, it may be that you decide that you need to upgrade your internet connection to make use of some of the other features. They're always there if you need them. We have organisations that have large files that they need quick access to, and so those organisations, what they might do is they might get rid of their in-house server, but they might keep a NAS or some kind of network attached storage that all of their people in their organisation can access, but again they can still sync that back up to OneDrive for a backup if they need to.
Question from Shirley. We are currently using Dropbox for file sharing. Will Office 365 provide the same functionality?
Pretty much. The main improvement between Dropbox and OneDrive, well there's a few actually, one of the main improvements for me is the ability to click on that file and automatically open it in Office Online and edit it. Dropbox quite often needs you to download it and then edit it and then re-upload it, which can be a bit cumbersome. But the big thing for Dropbox is around security access and permissions, and the ability to revoke access to files for users. If you have an employee that leaves, you can revoke their access to the files, and that can be a particularly important issue for some organisations depending on what files you are storing in Office 365. I'm going to take this opportunity too to talk quickly about some other security things. A couple of things that have been raised with me over time, concerns organisations have had, issues organisations have had. One of the really important things about Office 365 and any cloud software is it's only going to be as secure as the passwords that you use. I had an example of an organisation in New Zealand who had an employee who left under bad circumstances, and the organisation used shared passwords for everything, and they didn't change that password when the employee left, and they were able to access files. If you don't have robust password policies, and if you have users that use unsecure passwords that people can easily guess, then your file